So yeah, so this tutorial is a lot more discussion, because even if the aim is into data analysis in educational sector, and it's slightly complex, and the literature is quite vast in this area. So in general, that is called, so let me, I don't know what I did. So in general, the area is called educational data mining. So it's the same abbreviation as EDA, but it's quite big, because many universities, many of the these massively large educational sites like Coursera, edX, and all that rely on data mining from their students, right? And there are a number of things that are important in that category. Just one is exactly identifying students that are doing well, or categorizing students that are doing well, students that are at risk of dropping out. And so the universities invest a lot of money and a lot of research in this area, where, like, you know, whether even the module, the course modules are actually kind of helping everyone, or if there are people that are actually, you know, so some anomalies and stuff. So there is a lot of machine learning in this area. Even Moodle already has a module for machine learning. So which means basically you can actually use, even within inside the Moodle, you can actually have a plugin where you do directly there some kind of, like, it does a cron process that does the kind of analysis of the log data and other types of data continuously. So if you are, I think most other institutes, maybe even your university, maybe is using Moodle. And if you haven't used, maybe it's a good thing, just like if you want to allow people to, you know, it's quite complicated, but there are many others. It's called Blackboard. I mean, edX is, OpenEdX is one another. So there are a number of other LMSs that use. So I'm just gonna share my screen window. So once you log in Moodle, that's what you'll get. So in this case, we are using the demo, but we had 10 Academy customized website. It's called moodle.10academy.org, but it's no more available because we are not using it anymore, just to simplify things. But what is really is that it seems simple, but it's huge, it's complex, right? Because you can have forums and posts, but at the same time you can go to the My Course dashboard, for example. And so you could go to your grades, your preferences, and there should be some, and you can change, even it has an Amharic or a Panorama or everything else. In Moodle has many customizations and many languages. So that's one other thing. And then if you go to site home, this is the site home, and this is all, you can get also information. If you are a dev, you get information about the consumption. It's a highly designed module, so you get information about cache and memory usage and all that. So, but these are courses. So for example, this is one course if you are using course, and you can have everything from audio to video to attachment to everything, right? So let's say this is one of the course that you are looking. So when we think of a course, that's what we are, like, that's how you would see. So in the dashboard, you will get many of your courses in different types. So there are different modules that will give you. So this is kind of how, whether you as a student log in my case, I'm logged in as Barbara. So when I log in, it tells me how much I'm completed in this course. If I take this one, for example, there are assignments that I need to complete. And then there are wikis and everything inside it. And the reason why we are not using it, it has so much, but it's also complex. So students keep getting lost because there is a lot of elements. So for example, if this is a course you have to watch, and then probably there will be also a course, like a tutorial, a kind of assignment on that, right? So, and let me log out this one. and then let me log in as student. Login. So let me log in as a teacher or as a manager. Okay, the manager is manager in Moodle. So as a manager, of course, I am able to see even more content. So my course, site administration. So this is more important where I was doing. So I hope that you see me, right? So everything is working.
Yeah, we can see.
So this is what is a lot more I was spending. If I want to use users are added here, I can add them using a bulk like SSV. I will put them users as SSV. So and then I just upload them, and I can add just a new user, and I can create cohorts. That's basically like you can call it as grades, like for example, grade 1, grade 2. If you are in a school, cohorts could be just different classes, different grades, different, and there are also faculties. So you can actually use it for all sorts of things, like and so there are a number of, and then all the permission roles, like who does what. For example, if I want to protect some of roles, let's say I create a role called just viewers, you know, like, or feedback givers, and then I can only assign them just to see only something. And students have, so if you just like roles are like manager are this, course creators are that, you know, things like that, and permissions. So like defined roles. So these are the manager has a role. You can actually edit it here. Managers can access course and modify them. So it's kind of, this is a description, but what it is. So you can actually go in detail and add the roles, like, you know, whatever you want. So there are a million types of roles like that you can give or deny, right? So this is what Moodle good at. Like you can fine-grain control, and which means also because of this ability, this means also why the database design is so complex, right? So it just has to handle, you know, there are million types of, I mean, really a lot of roles, and each has to be assigned properly, and every user has to have like that. So, you know, you can imagine to have all this while at the same time keeping a very small footprint in terms of memory and computation, and it has to be fast, it has to load fast. This is what really is like you know, like a framework that is really one of the why it's used across many activities. So it's kind of like there are many types of activity roles, grade roles, and, you know, course roles, and every other thing. So the reason why I am doing this is just because when I discuss now the schema, you will start using. So there is a course. So the main part is a course part, which is the users part, which is like a lot about the users' permission, users' accounts, and also here, if I look at it, there is also the profile, which contains everything about like my user detail, reports that the user generated, privacies and policies of the users, login activities of the user, course detail, so whatever it finished, grades, whatever would be a thing, and then mobile app, if they're using the mobile app of that, and then other, like their forum, their other, basically, like if there are some kind of plugins that you used, and about that, right? So, and I go there, and so the user part is a big part, and then there's a course part. And the course part is all about kind of, you have course categories, and then courses themselves, and then within courses you have like blocks and stuff like that. So manage courses and categories, for example. So here is like, for example, course category, so art and media, and then these are courses. So each course is associated to a category. So that's basically mathematics probably is in the sciences and mathematics, right? So you can see like, if I look at mathematics, then it is, yeah, it's kind of like you can see information about everything else to which category it belongs to. It's actually, in this case, art and media. But yeah, it's kind of like, and how many students have roles, assignment, and, you know, every information. Most of you who have designed web as a more complicated website, you know this. especially if you have SSO, that means single sign-on, or some other types of signing. That's what you need. You need to assign permission. And this concept is also very essential when you go to the cloud, because the cloud is purely almost all controlled by this kind of like properties. Like everything, include a machine, is just a user. So in AWS, for example, you have a user, and a user is defined by IAM. So it's kind of like, and in every property in Google or AWS, you have like an instance has its own profile, it has its own role, it has its own user ability, it can act on behalf of you. So the concept of these properties, roles, assignments are essential just anywhere, like in the software development side. So that's important to have an idea, in particular when you have more than a few people and they have to interact, and you have to hide something, that there is somebody, a manager, who needs to do something, and some others shouldn't see or shouldn't access, and you have to be able to control easily, and all that thing is kind of defined here, right? So this is just another way to give you some kind of the best software development in just in 1 week, right? So you can see it also as this way. So hopefully you got that. So there is the courses, and there is a huge grade module. So the grade has grade history, scales that you have to define, and it could be it could be it's kind of complicated machine learning based grading. It could be blah blah, and then you have also reporting, which means like you can generate continuously on grade reports. So for example, if you look at grade reports, so you have to define as a teacher. Now I logged in as a manager, right? So I have to define what, and like a lot of some kind of the decimals in the grade. I have to say, it just has a lot of basically and then plugins, which is, again, Moodle is known for its millions of plugins. You can use it from, I don't know, like there is no shortage of plugin. It's like, that's one of the reasons why. And you can always also edit blocks by adding some kind of like new blocks to populate your thing. So that's also part of the database. So, and then whenever you edit course, usually you edit, just you say there will be something edit on top, and then you start editing. And then there's a plugins, and then there is a reports. The reports contains logs, so the ones that you are going to use. So let's say all logs that are important. So logs are like kind of, there is a time, the user. In this case, it's actually, when you really look at it, it's the user's name. But in the logs that you find in the database, this is actually an index. That means the ID of the user. So not in the ID of the user, in the ID of the system, the context, and stuff like that. While it's displayed, it's actually then rendered using the name, but actually in principle, and the IP and everything. And you get this in the log file, okay? So that's in the event name, which again, I will come to it. So what makes Moodle amazing is that its way of handling logs are the best basically just in the game, in this LSM. Like Google has Moodle has the best of logging. That means everything is logged. From the log file, you can find anything. If a user has, interacted, how long they stayed, and if the user kind of viewed something, clicked something, basically you will see it. And that part you should learn about it. And whenever you are going to implement something, this event, it's called, like in a software development, you have this subscriber, publisher, and subscriber model. And that is basically everything Kafka and others where streaming things are like that. So as long as you have like multiple activities, the best model is that you create some kind of stream which just basically publishes, and then it's basically puts it in a queue, and then whatever system, it could be the writer, for example, will subscribe and then start writing to a database. It could be kind of a displayer. The displayer will subscribe to that thing and then start displaying. So these kind of event-driven systems, and that's one of the log. So that's the main focus of this analysis, is actually the log files from the Moodle. So you have to understand, and so I will just go into, so the whole events API for Moodle is a big, really well written, and it tells you what to do and how things are ordered. So you have to read this one. I have given that as a, in the data section of the challenge, like the reference to that. So so you can just go and check it, okay? So, but this is how normally I was checking. If there is anything, I would just go into the log. And then there is a live log as well as, so if I just go to the site administration and reports, so there are also statistics. If I, so a course overview, I get, okay, view. So this is also, it has its own ability to plot, whatever in 1 week or in 1 month, like say last year, I can see, who saw what, which courses were used. So, a lot more I can get information about activities and stuff. So it has ability in doing everything else. So it's just, it's most active weighted, then I can just view that. And that was how I monitor how many people are and how many of the courses are active, how many people are watching and stuff like that, because the number of users per day and stuff like that tells you a lot about the thing. So this is very important. And another part is live logs, which is basically right now, it's just updated, keep updates, and that's one of the things. Just it gives me a lot more information, especially if I'm debugging the system. Okay, and in our case, we will just use, because this is already posed. So it's kind of, we use only just the logs that are saved, right? So in the reports, there is another one, is exactly as I was saying, statistics. You can just look, there are many types of Mount Orange. You can have a number of, if you are a university, for example, a number of organization. If you are actually a Ministry of Education, it could be just the entire country's schools, right? So this could be a lot. So let's say just that one and all activities. So that was one of the things I asked you to give me logins or posts or views. So let's say just in the logins and in the past 1 week, and let's say in last 1 year, and then I will view, right? So this I will get then kind of logins and unique logins that will allow me to monitor, okay? And unique logins and by just like in the course logs, right? So all of this, then I will be back, is all of these are in the database. Nothing is whatever I was showing you up so far is not in the, it's like the code is basically just querying from the database and showing. So everything else, it's just even the setup, like this, the way that it's set up for my user, for in this case, Anna, is basically in the database. So the database contains every necessary element. So if you update the code, how to render it, whatever, it doesn't matter, because the actual data of how that thing should display some of, like, for example, even the language, nothing is specified as Mount Orange here in the database. There is another thing called localization in the database, which basically specifies everything is kind of written by code, like variables. So every single thing that you see here are variables, and they are basically dynamically loaded. So and all of that dynamic variables names are actually in the database. So there is nothing that you can throw the code and replace it or update it, and nothing will change, because everything, all your data is stored in the database. And so you can just go with your, you can study, but that's where we stop, and we get into exactly where we start from. That was a context, and then we start from the project. So this is the database schema. Again, as you could see, just it's not the most up-to-date, but it gives everything, because the most up-to-date, you have to get it in the xmldb. It's slightly complex, but if you click it, you will see the Moodle, just a 3.6. We are using the Moodle 3.6. That database is for the 3.6. So you can actually just specify, like, I'm just going to do that. And you can actually see it, like a lot of information on that. So no, sorry, that was not, I think. yeah, so Moodle 1.7, but yeah, you get Moodle, I think. Yeah, so I will send, but there is also, you can actually directly see it actually live, the Moodle from this xmldb documentation. So I'm just not going to spend my time now. But this is also enough, like this part. So each of the, so there is a configuration, we don't care, but a configuration has many sections. So there are many tables under the configuration. There's config, config log, and config plugins. And then there are, this is one of the most essential thing, which is users and their profiles. So that's a table. There's a table called user, and every one of them has a prefix. So that because you want to control if you have different databases. So in my case, in your case, the prefix is MDL, Moodle underscore. So that means user means Moodle underscore user. Config means Moodle underscore config plugins. So all of the tables you'll see. But a user has a lot of columns. But in this case, I modified it because to anonymize the data, I deleted everything here and I gave you only just the essential things. There was no, for example, country code and stuff like that. I added country code. I added also gender, which was not there, but I added gender and stuff like that, such that you can reproduce what I showed you. So the user in the user table that you're going to get are slightly different, that you have to just check it. But the most essential part in the user table is the ID, because this is the ID that connects with everything else. So every other table uses, if it refers to a thing, it connects to an ID of something, and that ID of something either directly or indirectly connects with something. If it's like about an activity of a user, you know, it may be like a course, and then that table contains a course ID something, but that course ID has a thing, you know, like that. It's kind of very complex, but the ID is mostly used in many of the databases because that's uniquely identifying the entry in the users table. Okay, and so yeah, like you have many types of user info field. These are whatever, we are not interested. User last access, user private key, whatever, we don't care, right? So the role capabilities, here are interesting relationships that you will see, right? So there is this roles system that is complex in the Moodle, what each role can do, but each of them are, of course, finally then role capabilities associated to a user. Again, I don't ask you anything. This is just more like, if you want to understand how beautiful things can be designed to have very complicated, you should study, because database schemas, nicely understanding one database schema can give you a lot more understanding. I can tell you, all of my database knowledge comes from Moodle, and while trying to understand and study it. So that kind of will give you, and this is why it's really a beautiful thing, because it's challenging, but at the same time, it teaches you everything that is out there, and the best of people in this area have worked on it. So, you know, it's nice. It's complex, but at the same time, it's readable and nice. And so you can see like the categories, and so in these other parts of Moodle, which is interesting, is the user, course categories, courses, and I mean, you see, are all connected through some kind of roles, such that, you know, how users are connected to courses and who's kind of can edit, who cannot edit, and stuff like that. But we're not interested in that scale. And then the course module, we are interested. So this part you should understand. There is a course, there's a forum, and that's the most important thing. And then there is a course section and course modules, and then modules. And so these are connected in this way. So just you have to just understand this part. And grouping, I'm not interested. And then this is the logging system, the most important part. So this was an older version, so the names might not match, but I gave you exactly the parts that are interesting, which is in that case called log standard log part. And all the others you don't understand, you know, you don't care. Some of them are not given. And then there is a grade book that you need to just, you have everything else. So to just associate a user and their grade, you will use a grade book. Normally, because you need to wait and stuff, I was using most of the other parts, like the questions, the questionnaire, quiz. There are multiple things, but in this case, I'm not asking you because it kind of gets complicated, right? And the messaging system, we're not using any of the messaging tables. The Moodle network, we are not using. The caching, we are not using. Activity, again, there are assignments, charts, choices, blah, blah. We're not going to use most of it. I mean, it's kind of like this is the core activity that is in there in the Moodle, where, like, you know, when we give assignment, we'll give it in the assignment module. So there is its own assignment tables that are recorded. And if it is kind of like a forum discussion, the forum discussion has its own grade, whatever there. And if it's a lesson means usually in this case that based on some if-else condition, a user, if they answer something, they can go to something else like that. So it's a personalized education, basically. We design one or two of that, depending on the level of the student, to go to a different part of the quiz and stuff. So that was the lesson module, and a quiz module is just, you can add many quizzes and kind of give. So these are, and we have surveys, we have wikis, we have workshop, like the whole workshop can be handled by the workshop, but we don't use that one for now. So question types, again, we don't use, but this is just to show you, okay? I think this is actually, yeah. So this is actually the xmldb part that you can live see, but you don't need to. Okay, so I described this part. So the first part is really going through this to have a grasp. I don't spend a lot of time, just grasp like how things are done there. And so that, you know, when you explore, okay, you know, the user table is connected to many of the things. The log file, if you look at the log file is really well defined. It has events, it has driven, it has users, so it's kind of programmatically generated. So every log is kind of, it has a user ID, it has something, something, something. And you need to use that to kind of link that log to the user. And that's the most important part. And then the grade is also the same, so you have to connect that. So finally, you generate basically, I will show you some kind of, either using a query, SQL kind of script, or Python, you will generate some kind of data frames or stuff where you can analyze more. So, and that's the first part, understanding and kind of like getting it, or writing a SQL query to kind of get a data that you start working, right? And then basically the other part is the dashboard making, where you then start using, once you ETL the data, that means you have now in ready format, you start visualizing it with Tableau, and then finally you start thinking about automation and deployment, okay? So the task one is actual understanding. What does it mean, understanding? It's really just about the first tutorial that Jean gave you, is about really getting the data and putting it in a computer and querying it and knowing where are the tables, how many tables are there, and how many, like the tables, like kind of explore them, what are the columns and stuff. And then start like, okay, understanding also how many submissions are there, kind of plots. So all here, I want you to just write a SQL script, and I want you to write it basically in a file, and then you execute it to get the result, you know, not just thing, but you actually write it in a file such that it can be run again and again. So you basically write some whatever, it could be Python that will run it in a shared script, or it could be just like in a plugin, but the SQL script has to be given, and then which will answer these things. So that's, there is a reference here, just that you can check. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. We were told to submit a Jupyter notebook. So are we going to answer this task one in a Jupyter notebook, or we can actually answer this using either Postgres UI? That is for the task one.
So you can all put, I think in Jupyter Notebook, you can actually run SQL to connect it with just like a shell, right? So you can actually just do it from Jupyter Notebook. But if you really want just to write .sql file, that's also possible. You can just submit .sql file in your Git. So .sql file means just basically a script that when you run it with psql, then it will generate this data. Okay. So it's the first thing you should read is that how do you write? Just like Python, the first thing when you learn it is that you start in the command line in IPython kernel. You start giving command, and the next level is that you actually write those scripts into a file, and then you execute it as Python. That's that script, right? So another way is then you go to the terminal, like the Jupyter Notebook, and you start writing the scripts. It's the same here. Just you can choose the last two, either write it as a script such that it's executable, or write it in such a way that you can actually execute it from Jupyter Notebook. Is that clear?
Yes.
Great. So, okay. So this part, it might, if it takes longer, it's like, so this is basically another way just to start writing also a Python class to pull the grade. So basically just you will connect Pandas has an ability to connect with SQL, or in this case, Postgres, and find out how to connect it and kind of get that table and kind of just count it. Just so these are just a starting. So that just write a class to do that. Okay, just connect Python to SQL. And so,
hello.
Yeah. Go on.
Hello.
Yeah.
So does it mean we can actually, like what you're saying now, that means we can actually just write this code in the SQL shell and then leave writing this Python class? Is that what you're saying? Or are we mandated to write this?
So the first part of task 1 is just write SQL script. So it doesn't matter where you are writing it, but I just want to see it. So that means it has to be in a file, either in a Jupyter file or in a script, in its own script. So
okay,
it's just
thank you.
Yeah. And then the second part is just write a Python class, just again write Python function, not a script in this case, which basically connects through a Python file, just using Python, just to pull a table from the database. Okay. So and the second part is to, of course, now you are able to get these things. Now the second part is, okay, now you are gonna write a Python class. Again, a Python class requires sometimes to just pass, you can really pass a query in, Pandas has ability, or even you can just query in pyconfig to I will just show that you can actually query directly and get tables and stuff like that using your app scripts. So without changing anything, the script can be passed into basically as strings, as query strings, and Python can query that for you and then get the result and put it in data frame, and just then you can work on that. So that's just the part that you should do. And in that case, you are going to do the login. So there are different types of activities. One is in a log file. So this is a role in the log file. One is a login activity. The other one is a view activity. That means a user, when they log in, that event is called login. So just the time that they log in, it's called login. The time they see something, it's called a view. The time they click something, it's a click. The time they, I don't know, open a course, it's called that. So things, when they submit, So these are different, it's called verbs. So for the different verbs that you will understand, just for these three, you start getting the data, and group students as 1%. That means top 1% by logging frequently. So in this case, 1% means like the most logged people would be in the 1%, right? So just the top 1% of by login, by activity, by dedication time, right? So that's what I am showing here. So there are, like, the dashboard I made at that time was, okay, the total time they engage, the number of activities, whatever. But then I also just have, like, I will show the user. So this is the user index, this is the dedication hours. And then I will just show, like, who are the top one, like whatever. This is, in this case, it's all users, but it could be 1%, and I will be able to know. And then this is, again, the countries and by gender and country. So the same thing, it's a linked thing that I will just, for those same users, I will plot this thing, which is on another column of the user. Basically, I use their gender and their country to plot, and then I do histogram. Okay. So, and this is exactly what I asked you. So there is, I did dedication time, login time, and activity count. So it kind of shows again. So that was by top one, whatever, by user. And here I can also change based on which metric I am gonna plot, right? So that's what 2 is. And how, because dedication time is not a column, you have to compute it from the log. And how you compute it is that from a given login for a given user, for example, the login time, because it has a timestamp. And then from that login to the next login is what you consider, okay, an activity time. So the last activity before the next login, you consider it as like, yeah, like that's the time the user was active. So dedicated in that time. You're assuming that full time that the user was just active. It's not true, but for this case, just to simplify, we will assume that. And so that's how you compute dedication time. Just you group by the users, the log files you group by the users, and then you group by some activity, and then you compute between the login and the other one. So that's what you do in Python. And then you create a dedication time, and then you will plot it basically in your dashboard. Okay. Okay, and then once that is the case, then you basically just exactly like something similar, but feel free to design anything that you will create a dashboard in Tableau. That means when you click something, it will show the plots, basically just it changes based on dedication time or user top percentage, it changes the plot. So it's a connected plot that you will do it in Tableau. And then, yeah, you will kind of then finally is just automation and deployment. The reason why you need to do Python, sometimes it's decoupling because the system runs on database and everything. And if you are running Python, you're going to create a new instance, a new server. If you did it everything, of course, most of these things in SQL script, you can actually associate it, because you can actually in Moodle, you can associate SQL, and so it can actually update regularly. But even once you have the Python, you can actually connect your Python, or in this case, your Tableau, to the database, and always at any time that you look at your dashboard, it's an updated version that you get. So that's called, in this case, what we call deployment. So just, it's easy, and I think in Tableau, just find how to connect the database and stuff instead of passing only, I don't know, some CSV files, but just connect the database and kind of do the reduction, the data reduction in parallel, or at least plan that thing. It's like kind of write a slide how you do it. If you are unable to manage to get there, write a slide how you would do it. So just a strategy. So hopefully that kind of covers everything. Now the next thing before, in 5 minutes, I know that you have another meeting. In 5 minutes, what I'm going to show you is your entire screen. And then what I did, so for myself, like when I did that, the most I did was basically, as you could see, this was just a Python class that I have done. So understanding everything, the Moodle log analytics, and then I created a class that would, for example, just the Moodle user class that will, gets the info of the student and gets the user table and the students, and kind of process like the cohort, the necessary things. So it basically has a class that I can pull the user, I can pull something, or merge users if I need it, but in this case you don't need it. And then I have another one, Moodle course, and it does again, it gives me something, just a relevant one I want. So so this is basically get course completion, that was in the modules, or course modules and info and whatever. And then I have another one, Moodle grade, I wrote just that does, just basically that processes whatever is about kind of grades, right? So it kind of merges, fuses with users, whatever, and it gives me just finally a data frame that I want. And then I have for each of them, like for most of them, Moodle questionnaire, blah, blah. And then the most important part that I did was just this, the Moodle log, the Moodle log, which connects everything. You know, that's the Moodle. So that's what I was saying. The query is that I get the Moodle logs log, and then these are the verbs I am processing, exactly what I asked you. And then it's basically just goes and reads the log table, make groups, and it does some kind of logging count, total time spent, whatever, summary, make some kind of filters, equal filters, whatever. And then the dedication time that I'm asking you to do is this. And it's basically just, yeah, after doing some filtering, it gets, yeah, it kind of creates blah, blah, does something, and it gets finally just in the way that I want it, which is the log time, time spent, whatever, delta login, and activities. So this is just exactly, your part is actually this part, mostly. And just the count that I asked you is just this. Basically, it's a group by operations, blah, blah. Okay. So, and that's what finally I did. So just it shows you it's better to write just once you write it, this one, I can then connect it every time. I can use it to process Moodle data. Okay, it was, I know that it was quite a rush and run, but this is just to give you, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, go on.
Please, can you show how you connected your Postgres database with Python? And also, I don't know if you can share resources with connecting with Colab, because I'm using Google Colab and I've tried to research about it, but I'm not getting positive
yeah, I mean, in Colab, then I don't know how you're going to connect in Colab your database. You have to just install your database, or you have to do something. The problem is that in Colab, you can develop something, but your database, you have to upload it every time. I'm not sure how you're going to, maybe you can put it in your Google Drive, and from the Google Drive, maybe you can connect it, but I'm not sure in Colab how you're going to do it. It's only if you were to pull it from a network, then it's fine. But at this point, we are not pulling it from a network. So you are actually creating the database locally. So I don't know how you're going to do it, but just the way that I connect is, yeah, okay, I'm just going to share your entire screen. So I used, so I wrote just a Python script that uses PSY. So I'm just going to share that in Slack for the sake of, I'm sure you basically connect so it's basically just that, and this is the psql command. I kind of replaces this. The pandas iosql has that part, right? And it's basically just this, you know. So there are two, when I log in, there are two parts. I'm just gonna actually even send that one. If you are using locally, you're basically just saying, okay, this is the only thing you need. The root file for PostgreSQL is blah, blah, and then just basically create engine. And my create engine again is utils, db utils, okay. So this is my config, but yeah, that one is here. Where is my create engine? So in the SQL Alchemy, so I'm using the SQL Alchemy connection. So another one is just this, if you don't know it. So, and basically in the, you can, I mean, if you go to Pandas, you really, this is just in the documentation in Pandas, right? How you connect SQL Alchemy with SQL Alchemy. And then just basically with SQL Alchemy, you just basically specify this. I'm gonna post also this one just for you to, and then basically you just connect, you know, you're connecting with Postgres. Once you connect, yeah, like everything becomes easy. You just give a query and it does whatever you want. So whatever query you give it, it runs that query just like psql that it runs in the command shell. So now you can run it from Python exactly the same. So this is what I was using. And if I was using, so the whole difference is just the host, right? So if it's in the remote case, for example, AWS, then the remote, basically I will pass the host. So that's where, in this case, just the connection is from remote and this one is from local. Then after that, I wrote something, so kind of, you open a cursor in the database where you can just pass a query. That query you can always get basically an answer based on the query, okay? So that's my get data, where like I pass a query, just get data, and then queue the query, and then I get something. And if I'm using the Pandas part, then I just give only like, let me just show you here. So in Pandas, so if I do this, I can even just, so this is to SQL, get data. I only pass even just the table, and then I get the data frame, basically, just as a data frame. So if I'm using the Pandas connection, I can only just pass, I can even pass the query. This is just a quick query. Either I can pass as the table name, and I get the whole thing. So, but I can also pass any query here, any SQL query. So that I'm gonna just share this one, just for anyone, just that. Okay, maybe instead of that, let me do less.
Yabi? Is that the DB manager file or the query file?
So no, it's just basically just where you can connect with Python.
Okay.
And just the create engine from here comes from, the only thing you need in this case, the create engine comes from here. I just modify, edit message, and then, okay. So that's basically just what you need, okay? And host in my case is that, user is user, and DB is DB. Just basically, DB is the database name, which is in my case Moodle, and I created a user called Yabebal, so that's why the user. But in your case, it could be just Postgres, right?
Yeah.
If you're using Postgres, and if you're using password, you have to specify password. So there was a password part. So the password part is here. So it's like, if you are using password, I'm just gonna put it here. So then you replace the p-root with this one, okay? But just nothing more.
Yeah.
And the DB params are just basically what I create, just, you know, whatever, but it's just a dictionary.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that is, and I know, and I can tell you one thing, it's complex. We need to help each other, and it's, we need to help each other and to get really kind of understand and really try your best to understand. And we try to design a lot more tutorials to help, but please just work on it, because this is a foundation on every part, on every direction, especially data engineering, which is what most companies are asking us. It's like, because they have data and they don't want that much predictive analysis. Before that, they need to even just get the data and kind of put it together and find something, right? And that is where database is. So I would say really your competency is very gonna be important, and kind of you're gonna have a good time if you start understanding these things. So just put as much time as you can. Great, guys. So with that, I leave you to the next one. I know that you don't have time. Just have at least 3 minutes of break before your next session. Ciao.
Thanks, Yabi. Yeah. And cheers, guys.